well, thanks, Nick, and thanks to the panel for being here with us. I guess I'll sashay here over to the podium. I already mentioned this kind of earlier in my comments, but again, I'd really be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my team from DNR, who really were the key players in helping the department carry this legislation forward. As all of you can imagine, all of us came into the carbon capture world not knowing a lot about what CCS was, what it entailed. So it was a kind of a learning adventure for all of us. But Governor Dunleavy had a vision. He had a vision for the state. He saw the opportunities that existed in the world. He recognized the kinds of investments that the state could attract if we only had the right regulatory structure in place to encourage and incentivize that kind of activity. And so really through his leadership and his vision for the state, he gave us the marching efforts to move forward and carry that program out. And so I'm really proud to be part of the great state of Alaska, to serve as commissioner of DNR, and I'm particularly proud of my employees, the dedicated men and women of DNR that have done so much to help us move forward. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our great governor, Michael J. Dunleavy, who can, and I would also like to invite all of the legislators that are here in attendance that were key to, of course, helping us get this bill over the line. So I'll invite all of you guys to come up at this time.
Hey, for someone who likes public speaking, you like public speaking. I'm going to invite you to deal with guys at the end. Is this on? Yeah. So thanks, John. If there's folks here from DNR, too, that worked hard on this effort, is working hard on other efforts related to energy in the state, why don't you guys come up as well? Because I think what happened here this past session was historic. Very briefly, I was sitting here as I'm really excited about all these sections that are happening. And I was sitting here and listening to the folks that were just speaking. And I'm just thinking about all the opportunities that Alaska has that this legislature this year really capitalized on. When I think of Saudi Arabia, I say it's an oil giant, it's a gas giant. They don't have the fresh water we do. We have oil and gas. We're a gas giant. We're an oil giant. But they don't have the fresh water we do. They don't have the trees that we do. When I think of a place like Alberta and my friend, the Premier Smith, incredible energy giant that's going to contribute significantly to the world's energy needs. They don't have offshore and onshore wind. They don't have the geothermal and the volcanic activity that we have. They don't have the tides that we have. So when you look at locales all over the world, there's significant places that have significant energy production capabilities. To be honest with you, it's going to be a rare find to find another place like Alaska that has all of this stuff in its state and much of it just out the window. So I want to thank the legislature. I want to thank the folks in the Department of Natural Resources and other departments that contributed, AEA, our Alaska Energy Authority as well, and Curtis is up here. But I want to thank everyone that had a hand in this. And, it's sometimes the legislative sessions are like the seventh game in an NBA series and you get down to the last 5 seconds. But in this case, Alaska won as a result of the work that they did. So I'm glad that they're up here. Glad they're part of this conference. A number of bills and a number of initiatives within bills were passed this session. HB 50, as we mentioned, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We talked about the significant amount of carbon that Alaska can store in the basins that we know of. And as Lorelei said from Usabelli Coal, we have so much more to discover all the other places in Alaska, in our caverns, that we're not even looking at this point. So our carbon storage is absolutely significant. Our carbon offsets with 43 million acres of trees just under the state sovereign. When you think of carbon offsets in the lower 48, you're looking at landowners. Some of them are getting carbon offsets on 1,000 acres of land, some on 10,000 acres of land. This is 43 million acres of forest under the state, one sovereign, one owner in the state of Alaska. And the offset capabilities that will be in conjunction with the CCUS capabilities that we have, you can see where the energy possibilities then become really, really energized by the ability to capture this carbon. And so, again, I want to thank the legislature. So we have HB 50, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. HB 307, integrated transmission systems, which is going to reduce wielding and pancake, eliminate wielding and pancake rates, which is going to make energy cheaper. And as I mentioned yesterday, what's very important in anything we do, anyone in the audience, especially policymakers, is we've got to be able to reduce the cost of energy for those folks that are struggling across society. Because if you can do that, you can reduce energy for everybody. And so we're always talking about how do we reduce energy for those that can't afford it now, and how do we produce more energy for those folks as well. So HB 50, as was mentioned, creates a regulatory framework for CCUS in Alaska. It enables Alaska to attract long-term investment in CCUS and authorizes the state to charge operators for the use of public lands for geological sequestration. It also expands, this bill also expands the Regulatory Commission of Alaska's jurisdiction to include natural gas and LNG storage, including facilities operated by a pipeline carrier. John also mentioned the storage that we're looking at doesn't have to be just used for carbon. Depending upon the makeup of the rock and how porous it is, we could have huge capabilities to store hydrogen as well in many of these basins in Alaska. The bill also modernizes the geothermal resource statutes. 150 volcanoes in Alaska, 50 are active. We've got one only 80 miles from here that's active. The geothermal potential is enormous in the state of Alaska. And it's right on tidewater, and we are 8 days by shipping to our Asian friends in Tokyo. It also establishes reserve-based lending at the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority. And Randy, if you were here and your crew is here, you're gonna have another tool in your toolbox to help with development here in the state of Alaska. Allowing AIDA to make loans for oil and gas projects needed to increase coconut production. We have, under HB 307, integrated transmission systems, prioritizes the reliability, stability, and cost of consumers for power along the interconnected rail belt utilities, eliminates wheeling rates along with the rail belt, incentivizes new energy development by extending tax-exempt status to independent power producers, is what this bill also does. HB 273, the Green Bank, creates a subsidiary of the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. I think Brian's up here somewhere. There you go. Brian and I go back a long way working on projects for decades. Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, known as the Green Bank, to assist in financing of sustainable energy development. It'll unlock tens of millions of federal dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act. Creation of this fund will help Alaskans compete for historic federal funding opportunities to improve the energy profile of their homes and businesses. And so I want to thank, there's so many legislators up here, but I want to thank all the legislators that had a hand in this. I mentioned something yesterday when I opened up the session. We talked about all of our resources. We talked about all of our needs. We talked about storage. We talked about anything energy. But for me, one of the most important things is policy. And you see that playing out all over this country, all over this world. We have the energy potential across this world to create 1 cent kilowatt hour of electricity, like Sam Altman discussed not too long ago in a paper. We have that possibility. We have the possibility to transmit it anywhere and everywhere, to store it. We've got to have the policies in place, both here in the state, local levels here in the state, federally, and across the world. And so the folks on the stage today, this is very important. They may not be investors. They may not be scientists, physicists, petroleum engineers, electricians. But the work that they did this year and the work that they'll do in the years to come will absolutely transform this state. If you think some good things are happening now as a result of the work that they did this year, in the next couple of years, it's my hope and it's my goal that Alaska is an absolute leader across the globe in everything from microgrids, how to sequester carbon, how do you integrate things like coal and solar and wind so that it benefits everybody, every customer there is. And so, again, I want to thank all the representatives. Too many to mention right now. We're going to have two of them come up and speak in just a moment. I want to thank Commissioner Boyle. I want to thank Curtis with AEA, Randy with ADA. I also want to thank Brian with HFC, AOGCC, which is our watchdog oil and gas commission that works on behalf of the state of Alaska to make sure our BTUs in Alaska are being deployed for the best interests of Alaskans. And I want to, again, thank the joint effort between the House and the Senate majority. I want to thank Senate President Stevens, Speaker Tilton. Also, the utilities were part of this and working through a couple of tough discussions on what the bill should look like and what amendments should be part of it. So outfits like AEA, outfits like REAP again, came together to work on HB 307. And so with that, I'm going to turn this to Senator Stedman, who took the lead in the Senate on getting this bill across the finish line, and he's got a few words to say. But I think what happened this year bodes well for next year and the year after with regard to our ability to work together to get some important bills passed in our House and our Senate. Senator?
Thank you, Governor, for your leadership on this. He mentioned a little bit about the policy structure, so I want to back up rather than repeat what he went through on the legislation, so we don't hear the things over and over again. But if we back up even further, and we back up a decade and a half, the legislature belongs to a group called the Energy Council, and there's currently 14 states and 2 provinces in it. And the important issue there is the states set energy policy. Energy policy is not set by the federal government. The federal government, when they see problems, will do things to stimulate the industry in one direction or other. In this case, 45Q credits to get try to help drive the technology forward and get breakthroughs in technology and get the economics over the hurdle rates along the way. So when we go back 15 years at the Energy Council, we went to some presentations and they were talking about fracking and the coming gushing oil volumes that are out in front of us. And we came back to the state and met come back to Juneau and met with DNR and told them that I think what we're looking at isn't really the correct path we're on. We're going to be on this other path nationally that is going to swell our volume of oil, and we need to prepare for that. And we weren't much of a player in it. We haven't got to much of our shale yet on the North Slope, but we certainly participated in the surge in volume of oil and pricing and so on and so forth. So when we fast forward now another 15 years, here we sit again. Over the last decade and a half, or about a decade, I guess the Energy Council has been watching this carbon capture and sequestration, particularly on coal plants, and how economically challenged it is. And we're in particular watching a plant in Alberta called Boundary Dam. And then there's another plant in North Dakota now and one in Texas. So as we move through time and we watch the bottlenecks of sequestration, particularly on coal plants, we see the government coming in with some incentives for the next several years to help with technology breakthrough. And if we can get to that point where we get it to scale and economic at scale, coal plants around the world, and particularly the U.S. is what we're interested in, will become more competitive relative to other energy sources, mainly natural gas, and ensure that we maintain our base load capacity, as mentioned earlier by previous speakers. We can have all the renewables we want, which is all good, and so on and so forth, but if the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow and your battery goes down, you better be able to turn your heat on because we live in a cold climate. So base load is extremely, extremely important. So from a policy perspective, it's prudent and very important that Alaska stays on the cutting edge. And what you're seeing now is that very thing in place. We know this is going on. We are a pretty small, in the scheme of things, CO2 emitter, as mentioned earlier. But we need to make sure that our industries, our oil basins, stay competitive. And when the when there's debt that is needed, debt financing is needed, we need our firms up here in the basin to be able to secure that. When they go to the market and try to sell their oil, the buyers are now looking at carbon footprint. We want to make sure that our partners in Prudhoe Bay and all the other oil fields are competitive in that marketplace, or we're going to be punished by having harder time selling it and probably lower prices. Because we're, in essence, their partner. And what's good for them, generally speaking, is good for us, and vice versa. So we're working together to maintain that. And you see that with Santos coming up. They're a new player. What are they concerned about? Carbon footprint when their oil hits the market. We looked at ConocoPhillips. They have some folks here from south that are highly involved in that. So we need to get a little spooled up, I think, the legislature on each individual company up there and how we can facilitate that movement. So we'll stand by and do our part with the policy and move forward, and we'll also continue through the Energy Council to watch this. We have quarterly meetings, and we have had so many meetings on grid resilience and baseload, I'm about ready to vomit sometimes, but it's very important. And we'll bring that information back, work with the administration, and continue to make sure that Alaska stays competitive, not only in our production and our costs, but in our CO2 emissions, and move forward to carbon neutral. And if some company or some nation needs to rent a little space in Cook Inlet and send a check to the Commissioner of Revenue, that'd be fine. We know how to take care of that at the Finance Committee, and we look forward to it. Thank you. I think Representative Stapp's here to liven us up a bit.
Well, thanks, Senator. It's tough to follow that act. Luckily, we live in a big state, so we have a lot of space to rent, I suppose. Well, anyways, I just want to thank everyone on the stage. There are a lot of people, especially in Senate Resources and House Resources, who did a ton of work on these bills. I'll be relatively brief, you know. So Churchill said, no matter how beautiful the plan, occasionally you must measure the results, right? So when I talk about what we did with the legislative session this year with the carbon storage bill, previous year was the offset bill, and then of course the transmission line bill, I think it's fairly clear that the energy challenges on the rail belt are kind of reaching a point of critical mass. So I live in the interior of Alaska, and right now residential rate's 30 cents a kilowatt. Well, 30 cents a kilowatt's unacceptable. Right? You're never going to go anywhere. You're never going to do anything. You're never going to be moving forward. When a 1/3 of your folks who live in your town pay 1/3 of their income on utilities, you're never going to go anywhere, right? So what I think the legislature did this session is lay a framework to actually be able to move forward in a positive direction for the future of Alaska. What's that look like? To me, that looks like the ability to be able to move the cheapest electron up and down the entire rail belt system, no matter where it comes from, no matter how it's generated, to the consumer at the cheapest rate possible, right? And you either do that or you don't. So as the senator mentioned before me, you know, we live in a competitive space globally, right? Competitive resource market, oil and gas market, and the world is constant changing. And you either decide in life to get on board with that change or you fall behind, right? My honest opinion is I'm skeptical of some of these things. I think if they all work out, sequestration, offsets, great, more power to us. Alaska's positioned primarily to be able to reap the advantage into the next generation. I'm reminded by the way the first industrial revolution happened, powered by coal in the United Kingdom. Cheap energy, labor, right? Things that we have abundance of. So what I think we're going to now is a second industrial revolution. This time it's going to be powered by renewables and hopefully, you know, clean energy. Look out your window, I tell everybody. We live in the most beautiful state in the entire country. I think probably the most beautiful place in the whole world. And I hope that through efforts of like not just our governor, but all the people up on the stage, we can not only keep it that way, but we can deliver cheap energy for Alaskans and develop our future as the founders of our state envision. Thanks.
So we're gonna wrap this up here pretty quick, but I just want to thank the legislature for outstanding work. I wanted to thank again our departments for outstanding work. This is just the beginning. As Representative mentioned and previous speaker, Senator Stedman, there is so much that, again, on the policy front, we can get done to unleash Alaska's enormous resource potential. So we're going to be working on that this summer, next year as well. And when you come back for the conference here again next May, I am very, very optimistic that there'll be some phenomenal policies put in place that can be models for other locales. Because again, it's not going to work without great policies, and you're not going to get great policies unless you get a group of folks that can work together. And we know, we look at Washington, sometimes it's tough to work together on things, but I got to give the credit to the folks behind me, legislature and the departments. I think on some of these critical issues, they came together, and the result is what we have today. We would be signing bills today. The complexity of these bills and how they were crafted at the end with amendments, and many of those amendments were good amendments, are being reviewed now by both legislative, legal, and the Department of Law for the executive. But we are very confident that that should wrap up soon, and we should be signing bills here the next week or two that will put these into law. So with that, I want to thank everybody up here. And again, this is a model for the future. So if we can give these guys a round of applause, I'd appreciate that. Thanks, everybody.